Hello everybody, welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky. I am going to make a painting with you today. I'm so excited because today we're going to have a chance to explore another one of my favorite artists. This time it's an artist named Katz, and let's jump right into it here. So, excuse me. Here's just a quick little bio, kind of overview of who he is. You see, he's getting a little bit up there in age 93 currently right now. He's a New York based artist, and he also studied at Cooper Union in New York City, which is where one of the art schools that I also went to. He went there a little bit before I did. We did go to class together at the same time, despite how old some of my students may think I am. But let me see, there's any images on here on the Wikipedia page? No, not a single picture for an artist on the Wikipedia page. Interesting. But here's some images of his artwork. So you could see, when I just type in his name, almost everything that pops up. Here's the painting that we're going to make today. But most of the stuff that he's most well known for are these figurative artworks or portraits of people. And here's sort of what he looks like today. He's as I said, he's an older fellow, and I don't know if he's still to this day painting. It wouldn't surprise me because he has been painting for a long time, which I think is really inspiring. If I'm 93 or even in my 80s and I'm still painting, that would make me really, really, really happy. Artists don't typically retire. A lot of people start painting when they retire. So what do artists do when they retire? They generally just keep on painting. So you can see lots of different... I had a kind of hard time trying to choose which of his paintings to do because I like so many of them. But I will say, just one thing that you may be thinking about as you look at some of these is like, some of these paintings are a little bit awkward, right? So look at this face here. I'll just zoom in here a little bit here. A little funny looking, right? Those eyes might be a little bit close together, and yet he doesn't seem to be concerned at all about how realistic or how accurate these faces tend to look like. Here's a portrait of, I think it's the same woman. I can't remember who this is, but some of these, one might say, are a little bit more awkward kind of figures. The way that they're standing, they kind of look a little bit like, you might say, like a beginner's artwork, right? They have a little bit of a clumsy kind of a quality. And so, we can talk about this as we paint, but why is somebody who makes like this painting here? Why is this guy who, I think this is a beautiful painting, but I'm sure there's a lot of other people who look at that and go, my kid could do that. Like this nose looks a little bit crooked. What's going on here? I think what is amazing about him is how unconcerned he is with getting it right. And he's more interested in getting an interesting color combination together, applying the paint in a certain kind of way. And I almost get the sense in a weird way that the face is just sort of a convenient thing for him to paint. And maybe I'm totally like blaspheming his whole, like there's people who are outraged by that, but I just sort of, when I look at his art, I just don't sense that he's I feel like he uses the face as just a composition and to give him an excuse to make paintings. I'm just going to quickly look at some of his landscape paintings. Again, I could have done a whole lesson on his landscape art because he's also well known for making landscapes and paintings of flowers. But again, you can see these paintings have a simple kind of look to them, right? They don't seem overly complex. Like, look at this painting here. You know, it's a fairly simple landscape painting, right? It looks like a big flat color, a couple of colors here, here, and here. And based, if you knowing the methods that I've shown you guys so far, you wouldn't be, you know, I'm sure any one of us could make this painting relatively quickly, right? Having said that, I think that painting is a little bit smaller. You can see some of these other ones are, they're huge paintings. Like, this is probably 6 foot tall. Like, a normal person would not even come up to the top of this particular painting, as with a lot of these other ones, right? So they're large. Like, again, we can even look at some of these portraits here. You know, these are big paintings. So there's part of the way that he paints these paintings and the size and the, you know, the scale of them kind of introduce a little bit of a clumsy quality into the artwork. I personally find that really liberating, and it sort of gives me permission to just have fun and make paintings and not be so worried about getting it right. Because at some point it's like, well, what does getting it right mean? Like, at what point is it correct or perfect, right? Perhaps if your idea of what the Mona Lisa is perfection, then you look at this and say, well, that's garbage. It's pretty clumsy. But if your idea is just the act of expression and the pleasure that comes with painting, then I would say Alex Katz is, you know, a fabulous person to look up to. And I'm not saying this like making excuses for bad artwork or anything. I legitimately think that he just could care less about being perfect, right? And I just think that letting go of perfection is really one of the most important qualities that you can develop when you're, especially as a beginner artist, because a lot of beginners really like clutch to this idea of a perfect painting, and whenever their painting doesn't measure up to that, they're so hard on themselves. And it's really worth questioning, where does this idea of perfection come from? Like, why, like, what is your idea of a so-called perfect painting? Because if we went around right now and you guys entered in the comments what your idea of a perfect painting is, I bet you there'd be many different responses, and maybe a few of them are going to line up, but I'd be surprised if we had like everything would, I mean, I would think it'd be ridiculous if everything lined up the same. Anyway, let's jump right into the making of an artwork here. So, I posted a comment there asking if anybody has got their Christmas tree up, and my wife put our Christmas tree up just a few days ago. It looks fabulous. We have a 1-year-old daughter upstairs, and everything is super special. And I think my wife is just really excited to give our daughter like the most amazing Christmas ever. So, which I have no problems with. If we have to celebrate, you know, Christmas a little bit earlier and maybe a little bit longer, that's great. I love Christmas. So, okay. So let's get right into this. I'm going to get my supplies out. I suggest you do the same. I got my palette. I also gessoed a whole bunch of canvases that are laying here on some newsprint on the floor. And so that's typically what I do when I'm getting my canvases ready. I'll put a whole bunch of gesso onto the surface of a bunch of canvases simultaneously so that they're all ready to go, and then all I got to do is use a little bit of sandpaper, in this case the 220 sandpaper, to prepare the surface. Let's get a couple of rags out and my paints. I don't imagine today's episode looks any different for you, but behind the scenes here, this whole area has been completely revamped, and I've got a whole bunch of everything sort of lifted off the table. I've got a lot more room here on my desk, which is super exciting. Cleared all this space. I've been putting it off for months and months. Finally did it. It took all day Sunday to get the studio ready, and it was a bit of a disaster. But now that it's done, whew, I'm so excited. It's like so much more room to breathe. Okay, I'm going to quickly, I've got this canvas here freshly gessoed, and I've talked about gessoing many times before, so I'm not going to go into it again right now. Usually I use a block to sand. Do I have something I can use as a block? Here, I'm just going to use this eraser. I like using as opposed to using my hands, you know, are not an even surface, so it could potentially mean that the surface has, you know, a little bit of variation in there. So just something just a little bit more flat. This is not the best example. I usually have a block of wood that I use. Oh, here. I'm going to use my business cards from school. Since, you know, when was the last time I gave somebody an actual business card? Okay. I put like a box of like 200 business cards, and I think I've used one of them. I think I gave one away. But anyway, okay, so I'm just getting just a very, very like lightly damp cloth. Like this is kind of like if I just blew my nose in here, right? It's just barely wet. And just using that just to wipe off any of that excess powder. And, you know, I know that I've explained this stuff about gesso many times, and some of you are like, yeah, we get it. But I'm always surprised about how many new people come to the channel from watching an episode just like this, and then they go back and start watching things kind of a la carte. So I don't ever want to assume that everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about, because even those of you who've been watching almost all of them, there's probably only a small number who've seen every single one of these episodes. So I try my best not to just sort of speak as if you all know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is a beginner's class after all. So what we need to do is draw this image onto our canvas. Now, the original canvas is landscape format, so I'm going to do this in landscape. Let's get the image out. I'll also mention here there's two versions that he's got. So this version is the actual painting that's at the Whitney Museum of Art in New York City. And then this is a print that he made a few years later. And you can see that this like lithograph print is a little bit different than the painting itself. The painting, the original painting, is a little bit more brushy. You know, it's got you can see some of the brush marks on this bathing cap, you know, on the face, the eyelashes, neck, and the body, versus the print is a little bit more refined, a little bit cleaner looking, right? And that's just because of the two different ways that these were produced. But they're obviously very similar. And so obviously well, not obviously, but we are going to use this one here, the more painterly version, because I think that might also give us more permission to kind of be a little bit looser with our paint application. Okay, so I'm just getting canvas centered on here. And look at this canvas. Seems to me, is it just me, or does it seem a little bit, what is the word for that? I know there's a name for that kind of a shape. I can't think of it offhand. Anyway, so we need to get this picture onto this canvas. As you may know, what I like to do often is divide my canvas into quarters in an attempt to find the middle, right? And in this picture, the middle is somewhere right about here, like a teardrop coming down her eye. Okay, So that, and if we can, I'm also probably gonna, you know, not so that, sorry, I'm probably gonna leave a little bit of space at the top here so that her head isn't right up against the top edge. If you want to make it go right up the top edge, you can. I'm just gonna come down a little bit and say, okay, that's where the top of the head is gonna be. If I was to divide this into quarters, right? If I divide all of it into quarters, that takes me to here, here, here. It almost, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks kind of like the chin is right around here, a quarter of the way down. And if it's, and I just think even if it's a little bit higher or lower, that's probably a good, simple place for us to do, right? If you want, you can kind of bring it up a little bit higher. I think that might be where it is, but let's put it here. Now I'm going to draw a kind of big, let's actually just draw a circle. Let's start with a circle on here. We'll draw like a basketball. I know that the head is not a circular shape, but this just can be kind of helpful to get this out. We're going to paint over everything on here. So if we've got that circular shape, right, it looks kind of, you know, this is actually going to kind of cut in a little bit higher here. We can keep that circle going here. And then the front of the face, I'm just going to kind of similarly here chop this down here. And I'll just erase this a little bit just to make it clearer for people watching what I'm doing here. Okay. So we want to get to this. You see I kind of chopped off a little bit of the circle here and here. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line that goes, let's go straight up here. Okay. So going straight up. And then what I want to do is let's divide the top of the head and the chin in half. All right, so if the top of the head and the chin is somewhere like this, which is the middle of the face, and the middle of the face is where the eyes go. So this is your eye line right here. Okay. So if we think of this area right here as the nose, right, where the inner part of the nose, right here. That's where that is. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to take from the eye line down to the chin, and we'll divide that in half. And then we'll divide between the nose. This is now the nose, where the nose will go, and divide between the nose and the chin. We'll divide this is our mouth here. I've done a whole series of videos explaining how to draw faces. This is a little bit more complicated because what we're looking at is what is called a 3/4 view. So rather than, do I have a face here? Let's see this Egyptian statue, right? So this is straight on. That's a side view or a profile. And then this is your 3/4 point of view, right? Straight, side, reverse, back side. And that would be a 3/4 view. That's a 3/4 view, right? So it's like a quarter, 3/4 of the way around, I guess you might say. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is I'm just going to put like a triangle here. All right. And generally noses will kind of come up a little bit. So whereas this is straight, we're going to kind of bring that up just a little bit. Okay. And then when we come down here, we have these lips. And I'm going to make a little divot on the top here for the lips. And I'm going to come down here. And I'm trying to draw kind of closely to what she's got, or what he's done here. So technically this side of the lip should be bigger than, or it should be kind of, well, it should be longer and maybe also a little bit smaller on this side, right? Because we see more of it. This is closer to us. Okay. We'll come back up to here to the nose. And just sort of, this is where her nostril is going to be. And again, I'm not concerned at all if my drawing really looks exactly like the original. Just like Alex Katz doesn't seem to be, neither am I. I'm just using this as kind of a gentle way of drawing a face. If we can get accurate, that's awesome. If not, I could care less. Next here, I'm going to draw an eyeball. I know you're saying, what is going on? Why are we drawing a big eyeball? I'll show you here in a second. This is where one of the eyes is going to go. And then I'm going to draw another eye over here. And what I like to do is I'm going to draw another eye, like the third eye, in between here. And then another eye. And I'm see how it's a little bit bigger. So I've kind of got an extra eyeball in between the eyes here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put an eyelid over this eye. And then I'm going to have the bottom of the eyelid coming down. And then inside here, I'll put the iris and the pupil. And let's do the same thing on this side. Now this eye I feel might be a little bit too big, so I can always kind of trim it down and move it. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw the cheek here. And if we imagine kind of like this light coming out of the eye, or a V shape, right? This is the cheekbone coming out. Gets close to the lips. And then here's the eyebrows. And then coming back up into the head. We're going to paint over all of this shortly, so I'm sure there's probably a bunch of you that are like, oh, I don't know about this. Maybe I'm going to call it a day. This is already looking pretty goofy. I would suggest you just keep on going and have a little bit of faith that you can pull it off. Right, mine already looks pretty strange right now, and I'm going to keep on going. I can always change these features and make them bigger or smaller as I'm painting. I just want to get the basics of this composition in place. Okay, so you see what I did here? I had her eyebrows, and then I took this eyebrow, I brought it down here, just a little bit past the eye line, and then I kind of drew a line, almost connecting to the edge of the lip here. Right, and then this other line on the other side of her lips, basically straight down with her nose. Here's this chin. Let's now kind of work on getting her cap on. So this line is not quite parallel to the center, it's along a little bit of an angle. And then it comes up. And over. Okay. And then we can even see how we can take this line from her cap and make it her neck. And then where does this other side of her neck go? Well, let's just look. Imagine if we take a line directly from her nose and we go down. It's somewhere right in under here. Maybe a little bit closer to the outer part of her chin. Right, and we've got a line coming down here for the shadow on her neck. Right, there's not much space between her chin and her shoulder. I'm just going to draw that down here. And if I imagine this line going across, right, a little bit lower down here, so not quite there, but down here. And down here. Okay. And then we'll put on the bottom of the swimming cap this the tie on here. That's where this white area is, the clasper. Okay. So, oh, and I guess here we've got her top of her bathing suit. Okay. So, I'm just going to do a little bit of erasing here to give it a little bit more clarity. Because I've got all these lines crisscrossing all over the place. And obviously we're going to paint over everything. But it can be a little bit confusing with all of those pencil lines. So, just going to erase some lines. So now that I've got the basics of my drawing in here, I'm going to start making some, there's a few things I want to change. Right? You notice I waited until I got to this point before I made any changes. Right? I didn't fiddle with the eyes or the lips or the chin or the shape of the head or anything. I just got it all down here on the page. And then once it's here, we could start kind of playing around a little bit and moving things around if we want to. So what are some things that I may want to do to this? Well, a first thing that I kind of see here is I feel like her nose might be a little bit big, and that's probably not going to be too flattering. So I'm just going to kind of make it a little bit smaller. Still going to keep this part, but I'm just going to bring this in a little bit. So shrink her nose a little bit. Because what we were just doing is sort of like the general, the outline for a basic face, a generic face, right? But obviously, very few people look exactly like this. So we need to make some changes. Or, I mean, you certainly could just go ahead and start painting it as like this if you like, but make a few more changes. I feel like I drew her lips maybe a little bit big. I know some of you are like, oh, I had it smaller and then I followed your instructions. Ah! So I've took down the top and made it a little bit less narrow, but I still feel like maybe this side could come in a little bit. Okay, and that also means her chin is going to come in a little bit. Okay. What else do I want to do? Again, her lips still feel a little bit big, but maybe she just had some injections or something in there. So I'm gonna leave it. I can always make it a little bit smaller as I paint it. Again, things are gonna change as I paint, but getting this into a rough area that I'm happy with it would be ideal. What's another thing? Okay. Well, I look at, this is working well. Her hat, maybe I'm just gonna chisel that in a bit. Her cap, I mean. Maybe needs to come out a little bit, not quite so rounded up here. And then I feel like, you know what? I feel like the top of her head needs to come up a little bit higher. So remember I told you I wanted to come down a little bit? That's why. Because I wanted to be in a position where if I wanted to make her hat or her head a little bit bigger, I didn't have to like glue another piece of canvas to the top of the picture. Alright, so now I can move that up. There we go. That helps a little bit. Okay. And her eyebrows. Her eyebrows. Right now she looks kind of surprised in my picture. Why is she so surprised? Well, her eyebrows are quite high and arched, but in the original they're not quite so arched like this. So I'm going to taper them down a little bit. And her eyes are really wide. Not only are they maybe a little bit bigger than Alex Katz's version, but they're wider and more open. And when we see, like, just you can look in the mirror and try doing this, right? Like, let me see. Or if I go here, like if you're looking at from this angle and I look in, like, look how wide I have to get my eyes. Like, I'm opening my eyes as wide as possible in order to get white all the way around my iris. Right? That's not particularly comfortable. Right? Most of the time, this is how I am. My eyes, my eyelids are covering part of my iris. The iris is the part of your eye that is green or brown or blue or whatever kind of color of contact you might have in there, right? So part of my eyelid is chopping off the top and the bottom of my iris. So if I go back to this and I look here, well, I think I need to chop off the top a little bit. Right? And now this here can be like a fold, right? And same sort of thing under here. That already makes a bit of a difference. Okay. I'm just going to adjust here where her nose and everything like that. I do feel like her lips are still a little bit too big. So I'm going to come back down and just trim them out a little bit more. That might be a little bit too small. But I'm kind of in that vicinity. I could fiddle with this for quite some time, but again, I'm not worried about making a perfect picture. I just want to make a painting today. So I think I'm just going to leave this like that, and then I'm going to start painting on the picture. Now, I have suggested, let me see, let's get this view here. I want to just kind of mention, let's go to, graphite tracing paper. Here's some, oh, it's graphite. I want graphite paper. Let's see, I'll put a link to this in the image description below. So I'm going to suggest that for next class is Thursday. What's our next classes? Yeah, so on Thursday, what we're going to do is we're going to paint some images by Andy Warhol, and I will put a link to, we're going to paint, I'll just, since we're right here, because I'll forget otherwise. We are going to paint a soup can. So if you printed out an image of a soup can and then as a photocopy, we can trace it using that graphite paper onto a canvas. If it's about 8.5 by 11, it'll fit on there. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. You can even just watch next week's episode. I'll demonstrate how to do it using the graphite paper, and I'll also demonstrate just how to eyeball it. So just like we're doing here with this drawing. Graphite paper, what's another? The other Andy Warhol is this image of, it's actually the cover to a Velvet Underground album, Velvet Underground and Nico album. But we're going to do two paintings next week, the banana and the soup can. And having some graphite paper, like this is at Michael's, it just comes in this kind of a sheet in a little package, and you just put underneath the paper. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that next class, but I thought you might be interested just to know where those materials are if you want to get them in advance of it. Okay. So let's put some paint on this canvas. We're 45 minutes in and I haven't had a chance to start painting yet. I'm anxious to paint. I think you'll see that this comes together quite quickly. So what are the different steps that we want to do to paint a human's portrait? Well, like we've done in the past, I'm going to put some cool colors in the background and warm colors in the foreground. So I'm going to paint, it looks like if I look at the original, some cool like lemon yellow for the background, and then I'm going to put on this kind of teal blue over top, and that's going to really make a really nice vibrant color. And then in the face here, I'm going to paint in a kind of a little bit of like a peachy, orangey yellow underneath that we're going to use as our underpainting for the face. And we can even paint that under the cap and here. So let's get right to it. Let's start painting. So first thing I'm going to do, let's put some cool yellow on here. And let's see. I think he's just got, I was going to add a little bit of white, but I think I'm just going to use this cool yellow right out of the tube and put that right on there. We'll see. I think that should be fine. Okay. And actually, even before I do that, I'm just going to take my eraser. I'm going to kind of just gently go over some of my darker lines. Right? as long as I kind of know roughly where things are here, I'll be fine. You know, someone a few weeks ago kind of mentioned, why don't we just start painting with like outline everything with like a brown or a blue or a red, rather than draw it out with pencil. And for the very reason that, you know, this is a beginner's painting class. If I said, okay, let's take out the paint and we just start outlining lines on the page, I think half of you would just drop out immediately, right? Having a little bit of a chance to draw things out with pencil and to have the opportunity to erase is a lot more forgiving than just going right in on with paint right onto the surface. Once you get a little bit more confidence with your painting, then doing that is actually quite fun. Like, you really feel like you're it feels like, well, I've never rock climbed, but I just get that feeling that it's like rock climbing, because you feel like you're really vulnerable, but it's kind of a thrilling experience. Okay, so I'm going to paint cool yellow into the background here. So look at this big bright yellow. And I'm going to go over the lines a little bit. I want to cover up this white. So don't worry about being perfect here. We're going to overlap things a little bit. I'm also just going to make sure I've got all my edges. Okay. Need a little bit more. I bet you there's a few people out there who started this and were like, this painting, you know, this guy's art, what a hack. I can't believe he's as well known as he is. These faces are so clumsy and easy to do. Like, what a joke. Why don't we try doing something for making an adult painting? And then they started drawing out the face like I did, and then we're immediately like, oh, this is a little bit more complicated than it looked. Maybe my kid can't do it. Maybe I can't do it. And I think that's the value of painting, is you certainly start like looking at paintings that you thought were really, you know, super simple in a very different way. And for me anyway, it gives me a lot more appreciation for that artist. Okay, so this feels pretty good. I've got that painted in. You know, again, doing this makes it very clear some of the differences between my painting and Alex Katz. Absolutely. Absolutely. But remember, we want to use, like, what is really inspiring about his artwork is that freedom from, like, the tyranny of perfection. Okay, so just move this out of the way for a second. I'm just going to put some paint here on my palette. So I got my warm yellow. Let's get some warm red. I won't be using a lot of paint today, so I don't want to put too much extra paint, especially some of these cooler colors. I don't need, you know, I won't be using too much of them. I might use a little bit more of the blue, that's for sure. White, I'm going to need some white. I don't use any black, so I don't need any black on my palette today. And I'll need very little warm blue as well. Okay. So I've got all the paint on my palette. See, there's not a lot of paint on here. I'm going to use probably, the yellow and some of the white. I'll probably use most of this white for sure, and that cool blue for the background. But otherwise, I won't need too much here. We'll see. So now let's mix a color for here, for the face, the body, and the hat. So what color do we want to put down here as an under color? What I want to look for is the color. Often what artists do is they paint what's called the local color, and then they paint darker and brighter on top of that. So the local color is somewhere in here. I imagine it's probably this color here. So it's kind of a darker, it's like a skin tone. And then he's probably gone over top, I think, and I'm just looking at the original. Let me see if I can get to here. Just trying to, what I'm doing is trying to like decode the painting, try to look for any kind of little secrets. It's hard to tell how he painted this face. I think that's the local color right in here. And it does look like there's maybe a little bit of yellow right in under here. So actually, maybe before I go right into that, what I'm going to do is I've got this cool yellow on my, I'll go here. The cool yellow on my paintbrush. I'm not even going to bother washing that off. I'm just going to go right in here with the warm yellow. I'm going to put that under here. For the cap. I was going to paint the skin tone underneath this, but I feel like it might have been a little bit too dark, too reddish. And when I paint that brown over top, I was starting to get a little afraid that it would go, if I paint the green over top of this kind of peachy red, that it could make the cap go a little bit brown. I don't want that, so that's why I'm making a little quick change there. Okay. So two separate yellows. And if you can already kind of see here how these colors compete with one another. And the cooler color just wants to move backwards into space, whereas the warm yellow wants to pop a little bit forward. They seem to kind of, they don't seem to sit on the same plane. They're moving a little bit back and forth, right? Whereas, so this is ideally what we want, is we want just the colors on their own to start creating space and depth in the picture. So now we'll go to the face here. We're gonna mix a skin tone, and let me pull this down. So to mix a skin tone, I've got my warm yellow. I'm going to take some warm red and mix this together. That's a little bit too much red. Well, might need. I can use all this later on as I for a darker shade here. So I'm not just gonna throw it out. It's gonna be, could be useful here. Okay, so this, I've got kind of an orange here, almost a little bit more of a reddish orange. Now I'm gonna add some white to it. And as I add that white to it, this color becomes a little bit more peachy. And the final little step here to this is I'm going to add a fraction of the warm blue. You see what I mean when I say a fraction? Just a tiny bit. That was even a little much. Okay. So I'm going to take this color and let's just paint it on here. And it's a little bit, it's kind of dark. As I paint it, I'm just going to be a little bit careful. I leave a little bit of some hints for myself as to where some of these features are, especially because I've got that white in my paint, and that white might obliterate some of my pencil lines, and I might not be able to see it. So I don't want to go too... See, I'm just sort of like leaving. This paintbrush is a little bit big. So I'm going to go over those lips. Looks like those lips I can see through, so that's good. Let's see what happens if I go over the nose. Okay, I can still see the nose. That's good. Okay, so I can see some of these facial features showing through. I thought it might be a little bit too dark, so, or too opaque, and I might not be able to see those lines, but it looks like it's okay. Let's get just a smaller brush here. See how I'm just taking the paint right off of one brush and brushing it onto the other brush? Okay. Let's do her neck as well. And I'm going to carry this all the way down to the bottom here, we can paint red right over top. So I'm sure there's some of you are like, wow, that is really dark. I'm going to brighten it up in some places. And you know, I may not even need to do too much darkening for some of the shadows, because it might have been a little bit dark for sure. But I don't mind. The skin tone, this color underneath is the warmth that we want inside the body. You know, we have this skin over top of, you know, these muscles, these red muscles underneath our skin, right? When we peel this skin, whatever skin color you have, right? When we peel that off, it's all red under here, right? All these blood vessels and muscles. So I want the vitality, the warmth from this person to be kind of radiating, buzzing, whoop, 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 coming through these layers, right? So I don't mind if this layer is a little bit darker, right? as long as it's kind of on the warmer side of things. Now, I'm not saying this is how to paint every single portrait. There's certain artists who did sort of the opposite and painted kind of a blue layer to start with underneath for a little bit of a more paler kind of quality during the neoclassical era, but that's a whole other discussion. Okay. So now these eyes, I'm just going to go back into here, and let's get a little bit of white on my brush. Some white on my brush. And notice I'm not painting pure white, right? This is still a bit of like a flesh color. I'm paint right over her irises and pupils here. Now that color appears white to us because the colors around it are so dark. If I painted white right here, it would make her look really unnatural, like some kind of a sculpture or something. So I don't want to do that. Okay. So similarly, I can take this same kind of color here, this white, scoop up a little bit of this paint. And you know, this is each person's got a different color of flesh tone. So however you want to you could turn her color darker or lighter, it's up to you. But I'm just going to take this and go over top of her face. And this works really well when the paint is still a little bit dry, or still a little bit wet, I mean. So I can kind of mix some of this paint in here. So you can see how it's kind of mixing with some of that paint that I applied earlier. Might have been a little bit, keep this forehead a little bit darker. Okay. So all these shadows on her face we'll come back to later on. Oops. Doesn't have to be perfect here. So obviously the light is coming from this side and hitting her face from that side there. All right, if I need more, I'm just going to scoop a little bit of the original, add a little bit more white on here. Underneath here and on her chin. You can see that I haven't gone full, you know, super white, right? Or super bright where the highlight is. I'm building up there, right? It's a process. All right, so I'm taking my time. Okay. So let's continue here. So I've got kind of one little layer. Let's brighten it up even more. So I've still got my skin tone. Add a lot more white to it this time. Or maybe not a lot more, but just a little bit more. Because as I go over top of it, it's sort of like another layer of that same color. So now this is starting to go a little bit pink. If it goes too pink, I'm going to add a little bit more blue back into it. And the blue is just going to knock it back a little bit and keep it, you know, a little bit more on the brown side. That little bit of black also adds just a tiny bit of kind of gray to the picture. I think is going to be helpful. She looks a little bit pasty right now. That's okay. We're still working here. It's a process. If I need to mix a little bit more, just mix a little more. A little bit of this blue back in there. So this is how like his painting has a bit of a classical quality to it. In both the way that he kind of approaches painting, he doesn't use like a projector or anything to get the image on. He draws directly onto the canvas, just like we did, and that creates some distortions. Right, and that kind of distortion, I think he likes. He likes it when it's a little bit off looking. Okay. So I'm just going to darken this a little bit, adding a little bit more blue. White. Let's see, is this too dark? It's a little on the darker side of things. I'm just going to add a little bit of red back into here. There we go. He's painting with oil paints, which also allows a little bit more subtlety than I'm able to get here, especially on a painting we're working kind of quickly on. Man, he's really able to get I really like the radiance that he's got in this painting. I feel like he's got a little bit more of an orangey quality. I might be using a little bit too much white in mine. That's okay. Let's get a little bit more. So I just put a little bit of the yellow, warm yellow on here, and I'm going to put some of that back into this skin just to warm it back up a little bit. And it's getting a little bit on the corpse-like end of things. We're getting a little bit too dark. It's tricky, tricky. Okay, I'm going to use this same thing here and add more white back into here because I've kind of felt like it got a little bit dark. So I'm going to go over all of this white with. I feel like that helps. But the other thing that's, you know, a little bit tricky about this is we are looking at this image without the bright blue that's about to go in here. So that might actually be one of the, the next things I'm going to do. Because it's, I think what's happening is I'm getting confused by this bright yellow. And every time I look at the original, there's all that blue. So I'm trying to match them together, which is causing me a little bit of difficulty. So let's do that. Some of this color and just go over some of these darker areas a little bit, just so they're not so dark. Oh, okay. Well, let's see. You know, it hasn't turned out the way I was expecting, but rarely does a painting ever turn out the way I expect. So I'm just gonna brushes here. So I'm going to put that blue in because, you know, sometimes what happens and what's happening in this painting is I'm getting fixated on getting the face right, and it might not be the face that's the problem at all. I think it's the background that is causing me some difficulty while I'm painting here. So does it take, and I was waiting for that background to dry anyway, so now it looks like it's about dry. Gail says your plant looks great. I don't know, Gail. This plant is has seen better days. It is probably not, well, it's damp, but it probably needs more water. We had it outside, but now the weather here is getting colder and it's not particularly happy with me. Okay. So now I'm going to paint the this kind of sky blue teal here. So how do I mix that color? That color is, we've got the cool blue, and I'm going to take some of the cool yellow, right, and make it a little bit more greenish. And I'm going to take some white, and let's just mix this here. Now, I don't want to put too much yellow in here because I'm painting onto a yellow background. So while this color does have is more blue than that, when I paint it on here, I have to remember that this yellow is going to mix into this color. So let's just kind of see how things look. Well, you know what? I think I do need a little bit more yellow. But it's easier to do that, you know, mix a little bit and test it, than it is to just go right in. Assuming you want to kind of match the colors, right? Not everybody is particularly concerned with that. Oops. Actually, before I do too much finishing on that side, I want to get some of that same paint onto this side here. It's a little bit darker. It's also a little bit weird when I look at the screen on my preview screen is also a different color than my actual painting of it itself. So sometimes I try to match the painting on the TV, and then I look down and it's like, you know what, I always have to tell myself, like I say to you guys, worry about what the painting in front of you looks like, not the painting on the screen. Okay. Mine is definitely, you know, this is a little bit of, talk about clumsy, but that's all right. Definitely darker. I could have put a little bit more white, but I think I like the way mine looks here. On the screen, it's looking a little bit, it looks darker than it actually is, so I gotta remember this, what I've got here is the important thing. Okay, so the next step is I'm gonna paint her cap, and let's put some red down here. So, get a different brush. Okay, and this time I'm going to make a... I think I'm going to actually use... I'm going to use the cool yellow and the cool blue for this image, because we want this really nice kind of really bright green here. I need even more cool yellow. So this is why painting a bit of a warm color underneath is helpful. It's going to help prevent the cool color or her cap from wanting to go too far backwards in space. Okay. this area needs to be much brighter, so I'm just going to take some yellow out of the tube. Should I wipe some of this off? I feel like it's just a little bit too dark. So I'm wiping a little bit of paint off, adding a little bit more yellow back into this mixture. So I wiped it off because if I let it dry, I'm not going to be able to get back to this nice warm undercolor. I would be continually adding on to that cooler green that I put there. So yeah, a little bit tricky. I'm going to add a little white to this. Okay. Let's go a little bit darker here. Too dark. Just going to keep on brushing it in here to make it work. One thing that's happening is all of this paint is quite wet. So as I'm painting on it, it's kind of just scraping paint off the bottom surface. So I think I'm going to let that dry and clean these brushes and go back to the face now. Oh, Palash says, instead of gesso, can we use Mod Podge? That's a great question. It's not necessarily the intended use of Mod Podge, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. The paint should adhere to it just fine, but you know what? Maybe even before I'm just going to adjust the shape of this head a little bit here, actually. I'll come back to that. Okay. So, my goodness, this is a trickier painting than I expected it to be. Holy smokes. Well, this is what you get from trying to use some of the masters here. Okay. Let's try to get this skin tone a little bit here. Getting some yellow, orange, a little bit of blue on here. And so what I'm doing is I'm just trying to Trying to get a little bit of a brighter color that's still kind of warm. And then you're going to go take a little bit of the same color, just warm up these eyes just a tad. Okay, not the best, but I'm going to now do these lips. Okay, just clean a bunch of brushes here, so I can use these again. I'm going to go into the lips here with just some of the warm red. But I'm just going to add a little bit of white to it. Not too much white, because the white will make it go kind of pink. And a little bit of the orange. Okay, and then the bottom lip, which is going to be much brighter. A lot more white to it to make it kind of more of a pink. Okay. You know, while I've got a bit of red on my brush, I'm just going to wipe it off. Let's just take this warm red and a little bit of cool red. I'm going to take that. I'm just going to paint this on the bottom here on her clothes, or her swimsuit, I guess. Kind of comes up a bit here, just maybe. I don't want to go too heavy on. I'm just going to put a little bit of darker red in the corners of her mouth. Okay. Now I'm going to do some brown for the eyebrows and eyes. She's got kind of brownish eyes. So to make a brown, I'm going to take the warm red, warm yellow, warm blue. Mix these together. And even a little bit of cool blue. Oh, too dark. That's a dark color. So I'm going to mix it again a little bit off to the side here. And then I look, okay, I got a brown. It's a pretty dark brown. I don't think she's quite that dark. And I'm not going to use white to brighten it. I'm just adding a little bit more yellow, warm yellow, just to... There we go. You can see that. Now this might not appear dark enough, but just wait before you apply that dark color. Again, trying out something, because this is her skin right now is quite fair, right? So I don't want to go wild here. That dry, can I put my hand on it? I've quite distorted her face there, but well. Okay, let's paint her eyes. Okay. And now I'm just going to add actually a little bit of the darker brown to my brush for some of these outlines. Just gonna lighten it up a little bit. Now you see, I mean, it's not like I've rescued the painting, but all of a sudden putting a few of those darker lines on it really changes things pretty dramatically, right? It's all of a sudden this painting that felt pretty bad is starting to come back to life. And that's why I always say, don't give up, just keep on painting, because you don't know what it's going to look like until it's done, right? So now I'm painting her nostril in here. And be careful I'm trying not to go too dark too quickly. In fact, I'm going to lighten some stuff up here. Darken around her nose, underneath her nose here. It starts to go into the mustache area here pretty quickly, so I gotta be careful. So I'm just sort of painting lightly over top of previous lines, or some of this darker area here. And that just helps kind of bring some life back into some of these shadows. Oops, a little heavy-handed there. Man, it's these skin tones, like, you have to be careful, like, just as I've done a few times here, just gone a little bit too wild, too quick, and all the things change pretty quickly. What I'm doing now is just taking a little bit extra white. I'm going to put some of those eyelashes on her. So she's got these white eyelashes. Even more white. Is not what I was hoping to do. Well, I'll have to touch that up in a second. That's okay. Man. So I went a little bit too hard on the white, too much white. I got a little impatient, as I tend to do. So I'm just going to go back here. Kind of darken them down just a tad. And I'm going to paint around them in a second. A few little highlights where I would expect them to be. Okay, and I'm just going to go back and clean up this eye a bit. So unfortunately, I don't have a small enough brush to allow myself to really clean this up. This original painting is 12.5 by 17 inches, so it's almost double this size. So he had a lot more surface to work on than I do in this painting, but there's a reason why this painting probably sold for 30 million or so or more. And mine hasn't, right? Or won't. Hmm. Oh, you know, there's a number of things wrong with this painting. And sometimes you just say, huh, let's go fight another day here on those eyelashes are driving me crazy, but sometimes if there's a problem like that in a painting, the more that you keep adding to it to try to fix it, the more attention you're going to draw to it. So I might just have to leave that. I'm going to come back here to her lips and just darken. So I just used my rag to soak up a little bit of that color because it was getting a little dark there. Oh, and then this clasp, I got to do that too. You know, I when I look at my painting, oh, and there's a shadow here. When I look at my painting on its own, I feel actually pretty good about it. It's when I look at the original, and all I can see is problems and differences. You know, and that's not really not surprising really when I think about it, but oh, his wasn't quite as dark or as white as this, but yikes, Michael. So I'm taking my rag, let's soak some of this up. I'm just gonna try to erase this a little bit using a little bit of water. There we go. So if you get at that quick, you can erase something. So that was a little bit too intense, too much white in there. So now I'm going back, mixing a little bit of this paint again. And let's try this with, it's still white, but now it's got some green in there. I think this should be much better. Still pretty intense. Let's darken it down a little more even. There we go. This green for the cap. So right now I'm just touching things up a little bit with a little bit of the same color that I used for the cap. And I'm going to get a little bit more blue on here to outline it a bit, as he did. As a reminder, on this Saturday at 4 o'clock, I'm going to be doing a special bonus episode where I show and talk about all of the great artworks that you guys have made over the course of this course so far. And I'll do another one of those at the very, very end. But this is a way of sort of acknowledging all the great... those of you that are painting away and making these fantastic artworks and sending them to me, I want to show them and give you guys some feedback. So I've got probably 20 or 30 paintings that people have sent me, roughly about between 2 to 5 for each artwork that we've painted. So there's plenty for me to talk about, but I'd love even more of them. The more paintings we have to look at, I think, because you'll see that everyone has a different way of approaching the same painting, and they take different shapes and have different colors. I think that's really exciting. Again, you can clearly see with this painting, I'm less concerned about making like these super accurate paintings, as opposed to just sort of having fun and learning a little bit about how to paint and color. And okay, I'm just working now towards this eye. I'm gonna come back and just sort of darken in here just a little bit. Another thing, what I like about this painting, even in particular, is it really reminds me of some like Leonardo da Vinci paintings. Like, yes, it is a woman who's wearing a bathing cap, and he did do a number of paintings of bathers. Alex Katz did, but this really reminds me of another, of a Leonardo da Vinci painting called Lady with an Ermine, which I'll show you in a second here. That might have been a bad idea. Let's just... Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is not the best painting I've ever done. But it's a painting, and I guarantee if I was to try doing this again, it would get better and better and better. I'm happy enough with this. Can't see too much more that I'd want to do to it. But, that's part of the painting process is, You have some days you're on top of it, and some days it's a little bit more of a struggle. And I don't mind, you know, doing this in public and showing sort of some of my less successful paintings. I think it's helpful. I remember when I was in art school and seeing, like, I would have teachers who would demonstrate things, and seeing them kind of quote unquote fail was sort of like a big sigh of relief. I just was like, oh, like, I'm not the only one who fails. Everybody fails. Even like my teachers, who I look up to as like gods, you know, they don't always have the best days either, right? And that's something I really like about art, is that the human touch, and the human touch is an imperfect touch. It's not a robotic, mechanical touch, which is, you know, absolutely mathematically perfect and precise. What I like about painting is the potential for things to get a little bit skewy and weird and distorted, and through that process the hand comes through, right? Our own specific way of doing things kind of just leaches through. And I guarantee you, if everyone shared this painting here, we would have a whole bunch of different paintings, and they're going to look very different. And I bet you there's a number of you who've done a better job at this than I have, which is why I would love to see your artworks. Let me see. Louise Bourassa says, this is not an easy one to paint. Where can we send our painting for you to see? You can send your images to me through Facebook. The links are down below. There's my Facebook, there's my Twitter, and my Instagram. So you can send me direct messages. There's through the email on Facebook, or you can send them. You can tag me in your images. So if you like my Facebook page, then you can post a picture to your own personal page, and then just like me in it, tag me in it as like a photo. You can do the same thing on Instagram and Twitter as well. So plenty of different ways for you to send me this painting or any of the other paintings you've made in the past. As I said, there's a number of people who just sort of started the class and are working their way through some of the earlier paintings, and maybe this is the first time you've done a class with me. So as you can see, somewhere on the right or left, all the other classes, because this is what, class number 20 or 19, I think, in this series. So there's plenty of other episodes of me reproducing paintings by other people. So that's the way I kind of designed it, is that you kind of like, oh, I'll do a couple landscapes. No, I can pull that off. Oh, let's challenge myself with a bit of a portrait. Okay, is there anything else to say here? I'm sorry, I'm reading some of these. Deborah says, hi there, I am so looking forward to this tutorial to how to use cool and warm colors to highlight the face. So, you know, I could have done a little bit more of some cooler, darker colors around some of these edges, but that wasn't really how he painted it. And, you know, with these classes, I'm always a little bit trying to walk the line between replicating the painting and then kind of pushing my own little painting lessons into it. So we could have used a little bit cooler colors towards the edge of her body here, because right here this is a little bit flat. Do I want to do any change? No, I'm gonna say no. I'm not gonna get my paintbrush out, because that's where things often go wrong. I'm gonna get my pencil out here and sign this painting. And usually when I sign it, that's the end of it. What is it today? November. yeah, again, this painting has to exist on its own. So however, the more I look at it, the more actually I'm pleased by it. So that's partly the comparing and contrasting to the original. Sometimes just is really gonna cause you some anxiety. But I'm happy with the way it turned out. So thank you everybody for joining me for another one of our painting sessions. As I said, next class on Thursday, we're going to be painting a couple of Andy Warhol paintings. I'm going to show you the two different ways of doing it. One, just painting directly onto the canvas, like we'll draw it out just like we did this face, just with a pencil, and we'll do it that way. Because it's a little bit more complex with some words, some people may find it easier to make a photocopy of the original. And he did all the different soup cans, so you could pick the one that you like, of tomato, cream of asparagus, cream of mushroom, vegetable, beef, all the different kinds. So you picked your favorite one that Andy Warhol did, and then you'd print that out or photocopy it, and then it's about the size of your canvas. And then if you want to get some graphite or charcoal paper, you can put that sheet, and then we'll trace it around, and I'll show you how to do that. But I'll show you both different ways, so that regardless of whatever tools you have, you'll still be able to make a finished painting by the end, or two of them, because we're going to do another painting of Andy Warhol's Banana as well. So I'll put some links up on the Facebook page, which again is linked below there, and I'll put some in the link in the image description after today's class. So if you want to buy any of those materials and you want to know what to get, I'll send you to the right place. Woo! Okay, I don't know about you, but I am hungry. So, thank you everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening. We will see you in a couple of days for our next painting. Thank you again for joining me here in my studio. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.